Christy with Waves.
And we're here to talk to you guys today about what it means to be rooted and planted where God has called you. And we're just going to talk about that and see where the conversation goes.
So one of the things that we call girls to do is to start making waves for Christ. But one of the only ways that you can do that is if you're planted somewhere. So we're just going to share a little bit about times whenever we were planted. Christy, why don't you start?
Yeah, so for me, honestly, actually just a little backstory of my life. I moved around consistently all throughout my life, and it wasn't until I was 20 that we moved back down here to Florida, and I've lived here ever since 2006. So this is actually the longest I've ever lived in one place, which is just absolutely kind of crazy, because when you're constantly moving, growing up as a child, you get that urge to always like move, to change, for things to be different in your life. And for me, something that the Lord really had to help me with was I love change. Like, I love going to new places. I love doing different things. I kind of get a little bit crazy when I'm stuck in one place for too long.
It's an adventure.
Yeah, I love adventure. I love to go anywhere and everywhere and just see what happens. And so for me, after about a year of living here, I was like, I've got to go somewhere, like I've got to move. And honestly, for me, I grew up really more on the West Coast, so I really want to be like more over that way. And living in the panhandle of Florida was just something like, God, have you really called me to be here? And I struggled with it for a while, and honestly, like, I couldn't get away. I just couldn't. I mean, all of our family was here. Things were going on in my family's life where it was like, you have to be here. You can't go anywhere right now. If you went, you would be running. And so I remember actually one day I was out shopping because I was just having a bad day, and I love to shop when I don't feel great. I go buy ridiculous things. And so I was walking up to a store and I was by myself, and I was like, God, where do you want me? I was like, I understand that you're calling me here, but I don't understand why. I don't see the future in me being here, but you know what, God? If this is where you want me to be, then make my roots so deep that only you can take them out of the ground. That's awesome. And that moment I asked him for that, just walking around in my daily life. It wasn't in a prayer closet, it wasn't anything just super religious, it was just me just being real with God. He rooted me here. And that has just been an amazing thing for me to be here, 12 years later, going, awesome. Man, I'm here and I'm thriving in what he's asked me to do. And so we'll get to that point later about blooming and where he's planted you. But Caroline, will you tell us a story about like how he's rooted you?
Yeah, I know for me, I felt called into youth ministry when I was 16, and then part of walking out that obedience was going and being planted at a school where I could learn and grow. But then after that, your first few years out of college, oftentimes you're kind of taking job after job, trying to move up the ladder, make more money, have bigger positions and all of that. And so I changed jobs 2 or 3 times in like a 5-year period. And I know for me, it was a fun and adventurous time for me, and I love new things and meeting new people and living in different states and cities. And so I really enjoyed that. But then there came a time where I felt like I was called to move down here to Destin, Florida. And I was actually taking a position where I had 700 kids in my youth group to move to a church that had like at a maximum 30 kids in a youth group. And I had been on a whole team where there were all these staff, and they were helping me just with the youth ministry, 6 of us. And then moving to just one person show for the youth ministry, and I was like,
what you got?
Yeah, I was like, am I being punished right now? What's happening? And so I know for me, I really talked with the Lord about it, and I said, okay, God, if you want me to do this, I need you to give me a sign. I kind of had a Gideon like laying out the fleece moment, and I said, if you want me to move down here, I need you to make it where I can make ends meet financially. I need you to provide housing for the first 6 months because there was a housing situation. And then I need you to give me the go to start Waves. And I remember whenever I came down here, within the first 24 hours, all of those things were completely settled. And afterwards I prayed about it, and the Lord said, you will be at this church for at least 7 years, was his words. And I remember thinking, wow, that's a long time, having gone every 18 months to 2 years moving as a youth pastor, just like most youth pastors do. And so, but I have really seen And even as every year, I think there's at least one day, and if you're a normal person, I think no matter what kind of job you're in or school, but there's usually at least one day a year where you're like, I want to quit, I want to leave, I want to change jobs, and you get frustrated. And I've had those moments, but every single time I've gone back to what the Lord said and focused on that and stuck with the obedience. And as I've done that, I have seen God just open up doors and bless me significantly, where it was completely obvious, not just to me, but everyone else, that God was blessing exactly where He had planted me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now, since we've talked about being planted, things that come out of being planted are you bloom. Like, you don't have a choice but to bloom. So Caroline, can you talk to us just about times when you bloomed, and maybe even the process, because the process isn't always great.
Yeah.
But the end point is amazing.
Yeah. I know for me, one of the things I was thinking about with this was, there's a lady named Priscilla Shire, and she does a lot of different Bible studies and stuff. And I did one of her studies on Gideon, actually, and one of the things she talked about was Michael Jackson, which some of you may not even know who that is, but he did a music video way back in the day called Beat It, and it's not a great song, but he was an awesome dancer, and he had this whole big long floor that had squares, and as he danced, the squares would light up. And what his music team told him was, hey, Michael, you can dance circles all around this dance floor all that you want to, but when you step on this square and this square and this square, they will light up. So we would prefer for you to dance on those squares. And I think that is a great analogy whenever it comes to whenever you're planted and you start to bloom. I had done youth ministry and had a lot of success in it, worldly success, if you would, by numbers and things like that. But whenever you get in the exact groove, I was doing what I was called to do, but whenever you get positioned in the right place and you're able to get the light and the water that you need, you're able to just open up and grow in such a way that it makes your squares light up.
Yeah.
And things are just, there's an extra grace and favor on it. So I know whenever I was obedient and moved here, I felt like God just blessed it significantly. I know we had some hard times where our youth ministry shrunk first. We had a mass exodus. Everybody left and they were like, deuces. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, I just shrunk the youth ministry from 30 to 8. Great. And I was really a little concerned. And we have one guitar player and they don't even like me. And just things like that. But over the years of just sowing those seeds, I got to see how our student ministry started to trust me and the parents started to trust me, and I started getting favor and blessing from our pastors where they were allowing me to preach in the services and get favor with the parents and with the congregation and really just give me the rope to be able to go and try new things in our youth ministry. And so our youth ministry started out at 8, and then it went to 30, and then it went to 60, and then it went to 100, and now a year later from 100 we're at 200. And so it's grown in number, but not only in number but in depth too. We've seen tons of kids get baptized and they're starting to own their faith and be the spiritual priest in their own home. And so I know for me, I've seen as I've agreed to say, okay, I'm gonna stick it out even whenever it's not fun, I've seen the blessing of students coming to know the Lord, but also there being a fruitful ministry. I've also been able to do some things even with Waves, just had the favor and the blessing to be able to travel and do Waves in multiple places, where a lot of pastors, they want to put their thumb down on their ministers and say, no, we don't want you to travel. We want you at home every single weekend with the people that we're paying you to be with. But my pastor has given me extra time off. He said, okay, part of your raise is I'm going to give you an extra week of vacation so you can travel and go do Waves. And he's always sending us, whenever we're on the road, oftentimes, me and Amanda, we both work at the same church, we'll tell Taylor and Christy, our pastor just sent us a text wishing us blessings as we're starting our Waves conference in Mobile or wherever we are. And it is so nice to know that we have that blessing as we go and even do this ministry. And then on top of that, I've even seen just the financial blessing of, I've had random people tons of times just give me their homes to live in for free for over a year. Or I've seen people just supernaturally bless this ministry. Whenever you agree to get in alignment with what God has asked you to do, that favor and blessing comes, and you're just able to just glow in a way that it's like, it's just the glory of God upon your life, and hopefully other people see it and they turn right back to God to give him the praise. So
Yeah.
what about you?
Well, for me, and just to speak to what she said, like I've been able to, because we met probably I think like 6 months after she moved to Destin, and that was just a complete God thing that happened. That's one of those things that like when you ask God to show you where you're supposed to be, like he starts to bring the people around you that you need to walk in your calling and to bring you up into what he's asked you to do. And so just real quick though, just to speak to what she just said, like I've had the amazing ability to sit and watch her ministry grow at her church and her youth, and I was able to be a youth leader there for a while, and it's amazing to see just the connection that those kids have with each other, and that they have with God. And honestly guys, it's because she said a yes. She said yes to what God had asked her to do, and that yes wasn't always easy, and so sometimes it was hard. But she said yes, and she kept with that yes. And I just want to say, like, I'm super proud of you for that, because it's been amazing to watch. But my blooming situation was kind of interesting. I felt like at times I would go up. It's kind of like playing a game of, is it sorry or something like that, where you go forward and then, but you can get kicked backwards.
Yes, like that.
So, like, I remember saying, okay, God, plant me here. And he did, and as he started to do that, there would be like 10 steps forward, and then there would be like 5 steps back. And the 5 steps back would be something just dramatic that would happen, like whether it was family or friends or something like that, and I would be like, God, am I supposed to be here? Am I supposed to continue like walking on this path? Yeah, what are you doing? Because I don't know anymore. But there was this trust that happened. And every day that trust between me and the Lord got greater and greater, to where something would happen, I'd be like, but I trust you, Lord. I know who you are, and I'm gonna still walk where you've asked me to walk. And for me, I'll be honest with you, I think if you were at Waves last year and you heard our panel talk, you heard us all kind of talk about 2 waves ago, so 2015? Yeah. So at the end, we were all standing up on stage, and I had been a part of a previous ministry for young adults, and it was amazing. So many great things happened because of that. So many great things in my life, so many great relationships just were birthed out of that time. And I remember thinking that ministry kind of ended, and I was like, okay, God, what do you want me to do? Because for about 6 months, I was just turning my wheels. I was like, I don't know where I'm supposed to go, what I'm supposed to do. Even changed churches for 6 months because the Lord told me to, and that was really weird, but I was obedient. And
not that weird,
but it was from like the type of church it was different for me. But I remember standing on that stage for Waves that last night, and the Lord just immediately spoke to me, and he was like, that was training ground for this. And I was like, oh my gosh, because in my head, I had thought, well, is it over now? Like, did I do everything you had asked me to do? I knew that wasn't true, but your mind, like, and the enemy wants to play these tricks on you and tell you, hey, this is over, so this is as good as it gets. But in that one moment, like, I just heard the Lord speak so clearly as that was all training ground to prepare you for what I'm calling you to next. And in that moment, guys, I've never felt just a more just peace about where I was supposed to be. And that's the great thing, being rooted in a place and being rooted in Christ more than anything. Because if you're rooted in him, like wherever you go, he's gonna be there, and he's gonna be your foundation. But just trusting him even through the hard times, because it's not always glitter and rainbows and unicorns. It's not always just amazing things going on. But sometimes you've got to walk through the tough times. You've got to walk through the trials. But the blooming at the end is amazing. And I know that this is not the end. No. Like, it's the next beginning of something amazing happening. And even still now, like, we get to walk through things together as a team that are so amazing. But I just want to say, just stay rooted in what he's asked you to do. And also, sometimes it's not about how strong you are, but it's if you're willing to stand. Are you willing to stand on what he's asked you to do? Are you willing to stand on his word? And that will cause you to go farther than anyone else.
Of course.
One of the things we say in sports, because I played college volleyball, was talent will only take you so far until hard work comes in.
Right.
And what I've learned is the hard work is every day going into your word.
Yeah.
Every day praying, every day saying, God, what is it that you've called me to? Because some days it's different.
Yeah.
Even in that moment, sometimes it's different in what he's asked. And so just put in the work that it takes. And sometimes the work is just standing on what he said. Even when you don't understand what's going on, just stand on what he's asked you to do.
And if you feel like you're not blooming for some reason and you're like, I'm doing exactly what he said, and you start to get discouraged, one of the things that I like to say is go back to the last thing you heard the Lord say. Like, what is the last thing? Because if you go back to that last thing and you're like, okay, I need to focus on being obedient in that, it is easy for you to start like keeping your focus back on like what he's asked you to do, and you develop that perseverance and that hope. And when she was talking, I loved one of the things that it brought up in my mind was that verse about hope anchoring the soul.
Yeah.
And like when your hope is in Christ, like it doesn't matter what's going on, you're like, but he said this, and so I'm grounded on it, and you just, things open up.
And I will say on that, just kind of a practical aspect, start keeping a journal.
Yeah.
And start writing down what the Lord's speaking to you. And I'll be honest with you guys, like I was not that person. For me to sit down and write in a journal what's going on is probably one of the most excruciating things that I have to do. Like it doesn't come easy because I can never write as fast as I'm thinking in my head. So I feel like I can never get things down all the way. And I feel like when I go back, I'm like, oh, but there's so much I missed. But I have learned to put down the key things that the Lord has been speaking to me about. Even key verses that he has been speaking to me about. That way, in 6 months, when I feel like chaos is all around me, I can go back and go, okay, God, what did you ask me to do?
Right.
And that just kind of brings back the whole peace and the faith and trusting in who he is. Because honestly, every time I do that, I'm able to see like the victories through those 6 months. Because in that moment, I'm like, oh, there's no victories going on here. And I look back and I'm like, oh, look at all the things he's done for me.
Or even like if you go back to that word, sometimes like something in that word will shift and stand out to you like it didn't before. And you're like, oh, well, I got that part, but I didn't get this part. Now I got to work on that.
Yeah.
And so it's just an ongoing cycle.
It is.
And it's good. Okay, so we've talked about just being planted and then blooming. But a part of the whole gardening process that nobody likes to talk about is pruning. So Christy, well, first of all, pruning is whenever you cut off a branch so that more can grow, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So Christy, why don't you share a little bit about how the Lord has pruned you or situations where pruning has happened?
So it's funny, like as soon as I had something in my head, but as soon as you started talking about pruning, like immediately I thought about weeds that like come up in like the crack of like a sidewalk or a driveway, you know, and they're always annoying. And you go out there with like your weed eater and like you just cut them. And the truth is like, if you would get down there into the root and pick it up and like grab it from the root and then chuck it, it wouldn't, like it wouldn't come back. And I'll be honest with you, there were times during this process of my life that, man, just some weeds got in there. Oops. Whether it was things that either I let into my life or friendships that were there that had no business being there, you would try to cut those people off, and it was like
keep growing back.
And it was like they would come back in full force, and you were like, no, I can't. But I'll be honest with you, that's probably one of the hardest things for me, because I'm the type of person who, when the Lord really got a hold of me, I started going, but Lord, I see so much potential in them. Like something I love to say is, I see the gold in them. I see who.
But I see that.
Yeah, I'm like, I see who you've called them to be. So Lord, like maybe if they just stick around me in this group, like they'll get more of you. Not because of anything I'm doing, but because I know that you have such a huge presence in my life. Like maybe that'll just jump on them. And the truth is that there are people that you're called to to water and nourish and bring forth all of that good stuff. And there's also people like, you're just meant to sow a seed. And I really had to learn what, like, the difference between that. Because truthfully, like, there were people I was just meant to sow a seed in their life. They weren't meant to be one of my best friends along this way.
Branch, you know,
and it's been a hard thing for me because I don't like losing friends at all. It's very, like, I feel like I get, like, my heart gets just completely cut in half when that happens. And it's been hard. And I'll be honest with you, like, there's still things there with some people that I'm like, oh man, God, like, I really, like, I see what you're doing and I'm praying for them, but I know they're not supposed to be involved in my life. And I think these are things that, like, we deal with as adults, but the reason why I'm talking about it a lot is because I know, like, if you're in high school or middle school or you're in college and you're watching this, you're gonna have those people in your life. And that's when you really have to go before the Lord and ask Him, who's supposed to be here? And this is something, like, you taught me when I first met you, actually, was and I thought, this is really harsh.
I have no idea what she's saying.
And she was like, well, I went before the Lord and prayed to see if we were supposed to be friends. And I thought, ouch. And I was like, what'd the Lord say? And she was like, He said yes. And I was like, well, that's good, because He told me we're supposed to be friends too. And it was a real weird friendship that developed between us. Like, we just immediately knew that that the Lord had called us to be friends. But her doing that actually taught me a whole lot about, hey, you need to ask the Lord, like, if these people are supposed to be in your life. Because I have the personality where I'm like, the more the merrier, everybody's my friend, come on. And the truth is I learned as I started to grow and the Lord started really putting me in certain places that I wasn't called to carry those people with me. Yeah. And I think sometimes we put on false burdens on ourselves that says, follow me and we'll go together. And the truth is that not everyone's called to what you're called to.
No.
And that's okay. Yeah. And that's something I had to learn. Like, it's okay that you're not walking with me.
Right.
And you can walk in a whole nother lane. And that's okay. But I think one thing too, just to remember is, and I'm sure you'll talk about this a little bit more, but your friends and the people in your life, they need to have the same goal as you. Yeah. And if they're not hungry and searching after God like you are, honestly, they probably don't need to be in your inner circle.
Right.
And there's a difference there. It's not that you don't love on them and you don't care for them. It's that you don't let them into the real deep things because they can't handle it. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's nothing against them or anything like that, or it's not as though you're better than them. Mm-hmm. It's just, the Lord's called me to something else. Yeah. And it's okay that you're doing what you're doing, but if I'm going to go where He's asked me to go, I've got to walk this way. Yeah. And that's one of the hard things because, as like you said, pruning is cutting things off of your life that aren't supposed to be there anymore. And I'm really talking about friendships a whole lot, but that's just been something here in the last couple years. It's been something that I've had to walk out. You've got to know when to cut things. And it's hard and sometimes it's messy, but when you go before the Lord and you really just get his heart on it, it can be much easier. And he will give you a grace for it. And it's not that you stop loving those people, stop praying for them. It's that they're just not there with you daily. Yeah. And truthfully, I've gone from having tons of friends who are quite close to now having, minus my family, because I'm extremely close with my family, but honestly, probably 4 or 5 people who are not related to me that
are like sisters.
Yeah, are like sisters. I mean, we've got Caroline and Amanda who's on our worship team. You know, they're not family, but I feel like they are. But they're the type of people that I am super close to, and they know my heart. Mm-hmm. And you want to get around people like that, because people like that help you grow as a person. Yeah. And they see what God's called you to, and they're like, hey, He's called you to this, so maybe you should take a couple steps. You know, come on. And those are the people you want in your life, not the ones that are behind you, pulling you back and saying, but come do this, it's so much fun. and making you question everything that you do. Yeah.
I was going to say, I want to give a shout out to a lady named Star Jones. I read all the time, and so I'm reading, you know this, like I'm always reading books, and there's a book she wrote. She's a lady that's like a TV talk show host, but she is a Christian, and she put this thing in her book, and I read this like in high school, so I've traveled with it that long, but I use it in youth ministry a ton. She drew out a target, like you would do target practice with. And she talked about how in the center of the target, that's the hardest place to get darts into. And really only a couple darts can even fit in the very center of the target. But on the outer rim of the target, there's all sorts of darts that can fit there. That's why it's the easiest place to get.
Yeah.
And she talked about how relationships are just like that target, and how there's only a few people in the very center circle, and how those people know everything down in the core of your heart. They know your dreams. They may know some things that the Lord has spoken to you that are very private. And then there's people on the outside rim of the circle, and they're like, hi, how are you? You see them in the hallway at school, and you're at the locker, and you're like, hey, bye, you know. And that's kind of the extent of the conversation. And you're constantly kind of evaluating, like, am I moving you in and outside of the target? Like, am I moving you closer in? And then, oh, you did something where you were untruthful. Okay, I'm going to move you into another outer ring. I don't quite trust you anymore. Or, oh, like, I thought we were on the same path, like doing this whole, like, following Jesus thing. It doesn't have to be the same thing we're called to, but called to follow Jesus, being obedient, yes. Oh, we're walking on the same direction, and then suddenly they do something weird with their character, and you're like, maybe we'll just move you out of the ring, you know. And so I think we're constantly having to kind of reevaluate that with the pruning thing. And it is hard because sometimes you feel like God has spoken to you about people being in your life, and sometimes they truly are there for a season. And they are there for you to teach them something or to learn something yourself. Or even they may have a differing opinion on something, and it may cause you to go back to the Word or even go back to the Lord and question Him on that and what He wants for you in that department. I know for me, like this has been a big deal breaker for me, and I mean, I'm in my 30s, as is Christy, and it's something that you guys as high schoolers, middle schoolers, college age kids have to deal with all the time. But me and Christy were at a wedding last night for a friend of ours, and there was a friend of ours who has off and on drank a lot. Especially socially and publicly, but they want to do ministry, and they were not drinking last night. And I know, like, even this morning in my quiet time, I was so proud of them, because I was just like, okay, if God's going to call you to higher things, like if He wants you to minister to people that maybe, you know, they have alcohol problems or whatever it is, like you can't do that if you're constantly drinking.
It makes it hard to
you can't do that. And so I know for me, like that's been something that I've just said, okay, we're just going to take that thing off, and in order for me to fully walk in my calling, like I can't do that. And so, and I don't want to have people in my inner circle that do that either. And so like, I know there's certain things that are tough, and it's like you love people and you're like, oh, but I can't get on board with you with that. And so you just kind of have to shift them a little bit. And it doesn't mean that you don't value them or appreciate them or let them speak into your life. Another thing I was thinking about with the idea of pruning, like I've seen a lot of pruning happen in my own life with friends and with family and things like that, about who speaks into my life. But also, I like what you said about the asking the Lord, like who's supposed to be in there and who's speaking into your life. That's huge. And the thing is if we can ask the Lord to provide for us financially or to heal our parent that's sick, why couldn't we ask Him who He wants, like, to know the inner parts of our heart? Like, of course we can ask Him anything. And then another thing I was thinking about with the pruning was, I know in ministry and even just as a high school kid, there was a lot of pruning that I had to do. And sometimes that looks different than just even your friends, but it even looks like there's things in you that you realize, ooh, I just reacted to something. I know there was a job where I worked in a different state where I was doing youth ministry, and the youth minister that was in charge of me kept asking me to do a series of things that I did not want to do. I'm pretty, just straight up didn't want to do it, didn't care to do it, and didn't care to learn. And for me, I was like, I'm called to preach, I'm called to pray, I'm called to teach, I'm called to mentor, I'm called to disciple. Don't you make me edit a video. Like, I will be ugly. And so I had to edit videos, and every single week for a solid, I want to say 18 months exactly, every single week. I'd have to edit like 6 to 7 videos per week for youth group stuff. And I felt like it was the stupidest, dumbest thing I've ever had to do.
Oh, did you not
and,
know?
Oh, did I not know that I'd be filming this video today? And, you know, and I think that's one of those things, like, I really loathed it, and I despised the person that made me do it, and I had a lot of anger towards it, and I know it was very difficult for me to learn, and they didn't offer me lessons on it. They just said, here, swim. and I was like, awesome. And I know for me in that season, that was a really hard season, and I was rebelling, and I didn't get to teach. I didn't get to lead small group. I mean, like, I did some, but it was not like a ton. I was doing that other thing. If only I had known. I know we did video announcements for a while in our youth ministry, or not our youth ministry, in our church, and they had me as one of the video announcement people, and I remember the first time I did it, I thought, and that's why I had to do all those stupid videos. Now I know how to do this. Or now I know how to make a script for a video that needs to be presented, or now I know how to do a podcast on youth ministry, or whatever it is. And so I've just seen how God has used those times where God was working something out in me. He was cutting off the areas. He's like, you'll be a great preacher. Just give you some time to work on your obedience for a minute, and your self-discipline, and, you know, your perseverance. Let's work on that, and then you'll be an even better preacher. You know, and I know for me, like, there's been times where you've had to literally, and the cutting has not been people, but it's been cutting off your own desires and saying, I'm going to get positioned and be obedient. There's been trips even where I've wanted to go on certain trips, and my pastor has not given me clearance. That's happened very minimally, but I have been mad and frustrated, but it's one of those things that I'm like, okay, I know God said to be planted here, and I know that, like, he's working something out in me right now. And so I know, like, whenever I react, a lot of times it does cause me to go back in my prayer closet and go, why am I so frustrated? Why did I react that way? Why did I get angry? Why do I feel perturbed by that person every time I see them? You know, and so it's one of those things that you have to take those things, because God could be pruning something in your heart that you've got to work through. Also, I want to give a shout out to, there's a church called Bethel Church in California. They have amazing worship and music, but they have a ministry training school, and they have a program called Sozo, which Sozo sounds super creepy. And it's not a voodoo thing. It is literally a Greek word that is used over 100 times in the Bible for wholeness and healing. And it's not some new age, whatever, hokey pokey thing. It is literally like sitting down with someone who loves Jesus and then leading you through, who do I need to forgive, God?
Yeah.
And going back to that root and saying, okay, that's who I need to forgive. And now I need to forgive myself. And thank God for Sozo sessions. There is nothing, and that is one thing that is easy for you to do at home.
It is.
Just saying, because anytime you start to feel like a little perturbed, it's easy for you to go, okay, who do I need to forgive? And as soon as you go back to that root, you are able to kind of establish, like, okay, there's something that God's wanting to prune in me. Like, what is it about them that is bothering me? Am I fearful? Am I angry? Do I have, like, the need to control something that really needs to be God's to control? And so I just know for me, I got trained with Sozo, so did Christy, and so we use that a lot when we minister to people and even in our sermons. But then also, like, I frequently Sozo myself, and even once a year, like, I sit down with my mentor every January, February. I sit down with her and I say, I need a full-on Sozo session where you are leading me through this. And there's an objective person there. It's just a soul care, heart checkup, really. Yeah. And so I really encourage you to just sit down and go, God, who do I need to forgive? I forgive and release blank for blank. It's that simple. Yeah. So,
well, that's all we have for this video blog for you guys today. And we know it's long, but we thank you guys for sticking it out with us. And we just really, we just love all of you, and we love that the Lord is just speaking to you guys. And we just really just want to share our hearts, so you know out there that you're not alone in the things that you're going through. So we hope that this helped everyone, and if it didn't, let us know, and we'll see what we can do.
Season you're in, hopefully there was something.
Yeah, hopefully there was something. So we love you all, and we'll see you guys again. Bye.
Bye.